Hey guys, welcome back. So I know that you've been sitting at home, munching on some Cheetos, getting the famous orange powder on your fingers, watching Stranger Things, and it struck you, man, doesn't the Sig 550 look an awful lot like the Beretta AR-70? Well, you would be right. It actually does look a lot alike, and that's because there was a time back in the 1960s when Beretta and Sig were kind of having a little bit of an affair, and there were two children that came of that affair, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So in the 1960s, the Swiss and the Italians jumped into bed together, and they jumped right back out of bed together because apparently they didn't like each other. They were working to collaboratively build a rifle that would chamber a new cartridge, 5.56, for them, and they just kind of, put two alpha males in a room, right? One alpha male is going to want to go one direction, the other alpha male is going to want to go the other. They're going to butt heads, and ultimately it's going to wind up in a divorce, and that's what happened with Sig and Beretta. But before that divorce occurred, there were some things that took place that would push them apart, and that's talking about pushing them apart creatively in which directions they wanted to go with their respective rifles. Well, the Swiss wanted to stick with the PE-57's tried and true roller delay system, and the Italians wanted to go to a two-lug rotating bolt, much like they had been using with their BM-59, which was a derivative of the M1 Garand. And Kalashnikov even said that his two-lug design in his AK-47 was borrowed, the two-lug design rotating bolt was borrowed from the M1 Garand itself. So that's the direction the Italians wanted to go. The Swiss, not so much. And they had developed a rifle called the 530 rifle, and the 530 was similar to this in appearance, but it was roller delayed. Well, that divorce happened. Beretta went its own way, took all of its toys, said, I'm going home. The Swiss said, I'm going home. And they went to their respective corners and started developing their own rifles, but taking away from that divorce bits and pieces that they would both use in the rifles that they ultimately would produce. Now, the most famous of the two, obviously, is the Sig 550. This would later go on from the 530 to become the 540, which would then have the rotating bolt, and that would happen in the 1970s. Then the guns would start to see some military law enforcement use limited around the world in the 70s when the rifles were being developed. And also Beretta would develop their rifle in the 70s. They would call it the AR-70, and that's what I want to show you next. So first of all, take in all the glorious lines. That is the 551, which is just a smaller version of the 550 or the PE90. Stamped sheet metal upper and lower, long stroke gas piston, charging handle on the right-hand side, reciprocating charging handle. This one has a folding stock on it, and it would have its own proprietary magazines, which are AK-ish in nature in terms of being a two-point locking system, and diopter sights, and adjustable gas system out here. So that's the Sig. Now let's take a look at the Beretta solution that they developed independently, keep in mind, of what the Swiss were doing with the Sig 550 series of rifles. And look how close they got it in terms of how close these two look in terms of being relatives. So here's the Beretta AR-70 sitting just in front of the 551. Now, as you can tell, you have the sheet metal upper and lowers. You have pins holding the uppers and lowers together, that reciprocating charging handle, right? The ejection port here. You have your gas tube up here, long stroke gas piston. The recoil spring is around the gas piston itself. Same thing with the Sig. And you come out here on the end, and this is a grenade launching ring and stuff like that. Now, there are a couple of different versions of this Sport AR-70 that would come into the United States. This one is missing some of its military features. Some of the military features would include a gas shutoff here that would allow you to shut the gas off to use rifle grenades. You'll notice there are no rings on the grenade ring there. So this one's super civilianized. So this one also does not have the bipod on it, and versions of this gun would be imported both with the gas shutoff and the bipod on it. So this would be the super civilian version of it. Now, this particular rifle was developed in the 70s. The Italian military would continue using different military rifles. Some of the special forces and some military units would adopt the AR-70, but it wouldn't be until the 1990s that this rifle would get a makeover, and then it would wind up becoming the Italian military service rifle to later be replaced by the ARX-160, or as what we know in the United States as the ARX-100. So again, the rifles, very, very similar in design. Take a look at the rear sights. They have the ability to mount accessories on the top, both of them. Very, very similar guns. Fire controls are in the same spot. Now, The AR-70 that I have here does not have a folding stock, but later versions of it would allow for that. And the AR-70-90 would also have this really awkward-looking carrying handle that could pop off very quickly. A 1913 pick rail could be put up here, things like that. All right, so they look very similar externally, but let's take a look at them internally because the similarities are still quite striking. So let's talk about the AR-70 here really quick. To load the gun, you have the charging handle fixed to the bolt carrier, but over here on the left-hand side, I can pull the bolt to the rear and push down on the ping pong paddle, much like an AR-15, and it will lock that bolt in the open position. The gun also locks open on the last shot fired. So to reload the weapon, it's a rock and lock magazine like an AK. Put the front in first, rock it until it locks in the rear, and push that with your thumb, and now the gun is ready to fire. On this particular model, down is safe, up is fire. So it's the opposite of what you might expect. Locks open, last shot fired, rinse and repeat. Let's take the Sig apart first. We're going to make sure that the weapon is clear, no magazine in the gun, the chamber is empty. You have takedown pins. These pins are very interesting. You pinch them and then push, and the pin comes out very easily and allows the gun's action to open up. Now, the front pin comes out just as easily. I can do the same thing. This is definitely the easier of the two guns to take apart. So there's your upper and lower. Here's your lower receiver. Stamped sheet metal. There's your fire control group inside there. Your hand guards just come off once you get the lower receiver off. The hand guards of the Sig come off just like that. Now you can see the gas tube in the barrel. Now once again, see the similarities there now? The gas tube running along the top there. To get the bolt and carrier group out, you'll notice there's no spring behind it like an AR-15. That's because the spring is around the gas piston here. With the Sig, you have a little lever here. You just push down on that and pull out on the charging handle, and that will free up the bolt and carrier, so it'll just slide right out the rear. And then you're going to have a very AK style bolt and carrier group there. All right. Now you can take the gas system out of this as well, and I'll do that in a little bit to show you what that gas system looks like. Let's take the Beretta apart. Now, the Sig is very easy to take apart by comparison. The Beretta is a little bit more difficult. I'm going to make sure that the weapon is empty. Now I'm going to take the handguard off. You'll see there's just a piece of metal that's clipping the gas tube here and the barrel. So I'm just going to pull down on this, and it just pulls right off. Okay, so that's your handguard. Now, remember when I said you push down on this to release the charging handle so you can take it out? On the Beretta, you have a little tab right here, and you're going to stick a bullet in there. Let's see if I can do it this way so the camera can see what I'm doing. Pull back on that and take the charging handle out. And I guess I should open the receiver up first. There's a pin back here. Little tighter pin than what's on the Sig. There you go. Hinges open, and now that bolt and carrier should just come right on out of there. All right, so when you take a look at the bolt on this thing, once again, it has a 2-lug bolt system, and there's your camming surface. It's a little bit different in design, right, than if you take a look at it next to the Sig. The Sig looks truly more like an AK, but still this is very AK-ish, and it has the 2 locking bolts, and then it just twists and comes out the front like that, and there's your firing pin. I can't remember if that's held. Yeah, there's a little pin that holds that in place, a little cross pin there. And there's your firing pin. So anyway, that's how you take the two guns apart. But if you take a look at the bolt and the carriers, these guns definitely have a lot in common. Now I'm going to take the gas system out of the Beretta. This is where things get really kind of interesting. There's a little lever here on the front of the front sight block. This is your gas block as well. You're going to push down on that and unscrew the muzzle device. And then once you get that unscrewed, you can lift the gas block right off the gun. And then I just got to rotate this to its takedown spot. All right. And so there you have the gas piston that rides in the gas tube. This is where the charging handle interfaces and locks into the bolt carrier, just like that. All right. Charging handle goes in there. That's what holds the whole thing together. Now let's take the Sig apart. Oops, there we go. All right, so there's the gas tube. The recoil spring around the gas tube goes into the bolt carrier just like that, and the charging handle holds it all together. What do you think of that, guys? Pretty much the same rifle, just slightly different. The Sig charging handle fixed to the bolt carrier. I can lock the bolt open by pulling the bolt to the rear, pushing down that lever. That locks the bolt to the rear. It also locks open on the last shot fired. Insert your rock and lock magazine. Push up. That chambers the cartridge. Selector lever is right there. She's ready to fire. So that's the brief unofficial love story between Beretta and Sig and how these two siblings came to pass. Now you had those two alpha males going to their separate corners and they all went and worked on their own little projects, and then when they came back together years later, it turns out they came up with pretty darn near the same rifle. So what would have happened if they would have stuck together and collaboratively produced a weapon? Would it look more like the Beretta, or would it look more like the Sig? Or would it just be the Sig or the Beretta? Inquiring minds want to know. I can't answer that one for you. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you enjoy videos like this, guys, consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Follow that link and you can check out some of the perks and support us over on Patreon. Also, right here on YouTube, you got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button and you can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, please swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 14 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.